Hi, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. We're really excited to have you. And if you're returning, thanks for coming back. I'm really excited to see you here again. If you are new, I do try to upload at least every Tuesday. We talk about true crime things or true crime stories, unsolved, solved, both alike. So if that is something you're interested in, you can go ahead and hit the little subscribe button down below and the little bell icon so you can be notified when I upload. Only if you're interested, no pressure. If you don't want to, totally fine. I do want to give a little warning that some of the things that we talk about here can be a little heavy sometimes. So if that's something your mental health cannot handle, just go ahead and click off the video and I can catch you somewhere else. But please just know that your mental health is always going to be more important than any YouTube video ever will be. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into today's story. Today, we're going to be talking about Lori Slesinski. Lori was the daughter of Casey and Arlene Slesinski. It's kind of a hard name for me to say, but she was the youngest of two, and she had an older brother, Paul, and the family was very close, very tight-knit. They enjoyed spending time together. Lori was close to her parents and to her brother. Originally, the family came from New York State, but it was when Lori was 13 years old that they decided to move to Alabama. They moved close to Auburn, Alabama, and that's where she would live out her teenage years. Lori was very outgoing. She was very social. She enjoyed watching movies, playing video games. She was a big lover of animals. She loved all kinds of animals. She was just super outgoing, and she liked spending time with her friends. She was a very typical teenager. She was very beautiful. She had the blonde hair and blue eyes. Like, she was just kind of the complete package. But on top of doing all the typical teenage things, she was very dedicated to her studies. She had pretty high aspirations for herself, and she wanted to go to school and continue her education. So after she graduated high school, she enrolled in Auburn University, where she had a major in psychology and a minor in criminology. Her parents were so supportive of her decisions to continue her education, and they bought her a mobile home in a mobile home park off of campus. So she was able to live off of campus by herself with her little dog Peanut that she loved so very much. But this mobile home was a very nice mobile home park. A lot of college students had homes there that they could live off campus. And so it was a really nice area. It was close to the school, and it was just a good place for her to live, but she did live by herself. In 2005, Lori graduated from Auburn University with honors. She was a very dedicated student, and after she graduated from college, she took a job at the Eastern Alabama Mental Health Facility. She also continued living in the mobile home that her parents had bought for her, and she would just commute back and forth to work. But she did have plans to go back to school. She wanted to get her master's in psychology. During her time at school, Lori still kept in really close contact with her family. She probably didn't talk to her parents every single day, but they did try to keep in very close contact, which meant that they did speak almost every single day. She was still really close to her family and her friends, and during her time in college, she had met new friends, and one in particular, her name was Lindsay Braun. They had met when they were juniors in college, and their friendship just kind of blossomed and flourished. And they would get even closer after graduation because they took jobs at the same place. So at this point in Lori's life, she had a good job, she had a good group of friends, like she was close to her family, like everything just seemed to be going really well. On June 10th of 2006, Lori and her friends had planned a little get-together, a little girls' night out. They were going to go to Lindsay's house and watch a movie, have a couple of drinks, just have a good time together. That night around 6:30 p.m., Lori called Lindsay and said, "Hey, I'm going to stop by the store and then I'll be by your house." And Lindsay waited for her, and Lori never showed up. She never came. Lindsay was worried that evening when Lori never showed up after she said that she was headed her way. But it wasn't until the next morning that she was really alarmed. She had been calling Lori. She had called Lori several times and left several messages on her voicemail, and Lori just didn't call back and didn't respond or anything. This was unusual for Lori. She was a pretty reliable person, and she was the kind of person that would let, her friends know if something was wrong. But Lindsay didn't think of anything until the next day on Monday when she went to work, and Lori hadn't shown up to work. This really freaked Lindsay out. This is when she knew that something was really wrong. So Lindsay and another coworker of them had decided to go to Lori's house and see what was going on. When they arrived at Lori's house, they noticed that the house was unlocked and the AC was on, and Peanut, Lori's dog, was in the crate. What was strange, though, is that in the crate, it was clean. It looked like Peanut was being taken care of. He had food and water, like he was nourished. He wasn't like, it didn't look like someone wasn't taking care of him or he hadn't been taken care of in several days. Lindsay also noticed that there were, Lori had put 3 rugs in her kitchen because Peanut refused to walk on the laminate or the tile in the kitchen. So Lori had put down some rugs so that Peanut could walk into the kitchen, and Lindsay noticed that those rugs were gone. She also noticed that a trash can was gone, and all of this was really strange. When Lori didn't show up for another day's work, her place of employment, her work, finally called her mom and said, "Hey, Lori hasn't shown up for 2 days. What's going on?" And Arlene was immediately alarmed at this too. It was so unlike Lori to just not show up. She was a very reliable person, and if she was sick or if something had happened, she was the kind of person that would call into her work and say, "Hey, you know, I can't come in today," the whole thing. So Arlene was alarmed by this, and so she called her husband and said, "Hey, something's going on with Lori." She got in her car and she drove to Auburn to see what was going on. When she got to Lori's house, she noticed that the door was ajar, and I don't know if it was left ajar by Lindsay and the coworker that had come to check on Lori, or if it was like that originally, but she noticed the same things that Lindsay had noticed. But Arlene also noticed that there was a pillow missing from the couch, and that one of her Galileo thermometers, one of these, was also missing from Lori's house, and that her landline or the cord for her landline phone was missing. And I think that's probably the most disturbing. That would have disturbed me most coming into a scene like that. But the house was clean and everything was put up, and just like her bed was made. The house didn't look messed up. It looked clean, but there were these several things that were missing that were alarming to the people that came in. So by this point, it was June 13th. So 3 days had gone by since Lori had plans to go see Lindsay at her house. And Arlene was the one to file the missing persons report. She filed that she contacted police and said that her daughter was missing on June 13th of 2006. When police arrived, they did an initial search of the house, and nothing seemed that amiss apart from the few things that Arlene and Lindsay had noticed were missing. But when they looked a little closer, they noticed that there were signs of a struggle. There were scuff marks on the walls, and they also found semen on her bed, and they did find trace amounts of blood on her doorknob. So police start searching for any sign of Lori, thinking maybe, you know, if we could just find any sign. And they did find some surveillance footage of Lori at a local Walmart shortly after she had called Lindsay. But this was the last sighting of Lori anywhere. Police did continue to investigate, but it seemed like there were no solid leads until a man named Daryl Richard Ennis called Arlene, Lori's mother. Now, Daryl was someone that was normal, that people referred to as Rick. That's how everyone knew him, was Rick. And Rick was a friend of Lori. Lori and him had met, and Lori, they seemed to hit it off. They seemed like they had become pretty good friends. Rick even came to Lori's house to visit her family sometimes, and Lori said that she just felt bad for him because he didn't seem to have any family around him. So they were pretty good friends. But when Rick called Arlene, he told Arlene that he and Lori had been growing marijuana together, and that he thought that Lori had gone off on a drug deal. Arlene found this strange because Lori had not been in any kind of trouble in her entire life, really. She was not This was, I mean, it was way out of left field. Lori was someone who was very dedicated to her studies and her work, and it seemed like she had a good job, so why would she be selling marijuana on the side? But this information was also given to police by Rick. He called the police and told them the same thing, and when they brought him in for an interview, he gave a little bit more information. He said that they had been growing marijuana together and that she had taken her share of it to go sell. Rick also told police that he thought she was dealing with some pretty shady characters, that he thought maybe she was dealing to some pretty shady characters, but that's all he really said. But with this new information, police are obviously going to dig into this tip, and so they went and did a deeper search of Lori's trailer, and they found absolutely nothing. I think if someone was actually dealing like that, they would have found some kind of evidence as to her being a drug dealer at all, but they found absolutely nothing that could confirm Rick's statement. But it was on June 14th that police found the most chilling evidence. They found Lori's car in near an impasse near a bowling alley where Rick had worked. The car was completely engulfed in flames, and police said that this fire was so hot that it had completely destroyed any evidence that they could have possibly found from the car. Surrounding the car, though, they did find a cigarette butt, and the cigarette had been hand rolled, and they also found a gas can several meters away from the car. This would make police change the investigation from a missing person to a possible homicide. Police continue to talk to friends and family. It's pretty typical in an investigation like this that police talk to people who were close to the victim. So they were talking to Lindsay again, and she told police that during the phone call she had on June 10th, when Lori said she was going to stop by the store and then come to her house, Lindsay said that she had heard Rick in the background. She hadn't thought anything strange she didn't think this was strange because Rick was a known friend of Lori, so she didn't think anything of it. And police did go talk to Rick, asking, if he had been around Lori around the time, and he did admit that he had been at Lori's house, but when he was there, Lori was getting ready to go to the store, and when he left, she was alive and well. She was completely fine. Lindsay also let investigators know that Rick had written Lori a love letter shortly before her disappearance, and Lori had rejected this. She told Rick that she didn't have any romantic feelings towards him and that it just wasn't mutual. She didn't feel that way about him. With all of this information, police did decide to search Rick's vehicle, and in the vehicle they found some pretty disturbing things. They found a knife, a pair of handcuffs, and also several cleaning supplies. And also, while they were interviewing Rick, they noticed that he had several scratches all over his body, and when asked about this, Rick said that he had gotten those from his dog. But at this point, police are looking pretty closely at Rick, and so they started looking into his background, and this is where they found some really disturbing things. So when Rick was 12 years old, he was arrested for murdering his mother and his stepfather. So he was only 12 years old, and his mother had remarried this man, and they were said to be good people, good church-going people, but they were planning to move, and this had allegedly angered Rick. He didn't want to leave his school. He didn't want to leave his friends. So his solution to this was to murder his mother and his stepfather, and he was only 12 years old. He was arrested after he crashed the family car, but it's believed that he lived in the home with his mother's body and his stepfather's body for over 2 days while he continued to go to school like everything was normal. He also admitted that he had plans to murder his 2 stepsisters, and so it's just shocking to say the least. But since he was so young when he committed these crimes, he was only sentenced, they couldn't try him as an adult, so they sentenced him to 9 years in prison, and I believe he would have been about 21 when he was released. And he was just set free. He brutally murdered 2 people and they just let him go. It was after he was released that he moved to Auburn, and that's where he met Lori. But the problem with all of this is that the evidence they had against Rick was circumstantial at best, and they can't charge him with the murder of Lori. First of all, they didn't have a body, and second of all, just because he murdered someone in his past doesn't mean he necessarily murdered Lori. But everything, it's pretty obvious. I don't want to say it's obvious, but it seems pretty obvious that he hurt Lori, you know, maybe because she didn't have romantic feelings towards him. But as soon as Rick found out that he was a suspect in Lori's disappearance and possible murder, he basically skipped town. By the time 2007 rolled around, he had made it to Huntsville, Alabama, which was about 3 hours away from Auburn, and he moved in with a roommate. This roommate would eventually find out about his past of him murdering his mother and his stepfather, and he asked him to leave. He asked him to go, and I guess this had really upset Rick, and he ended up destroying the house that they shared. And so this is what caused the roommate to call police. When police were searching it, they found the rugs that were missing from Lori's house. Rick had told his roommate that they had been a gift from Lori, which she loved her dog so much, and she put those rugs there specifically so that Peanut could walk into the kitchen. So I highly doubt that she would give these rugs as a gift to Rick. It just seems like a very strange gift. This roommate also told police that Rick had told him that he had been in love with a girl, but she had gone missing. But once again, all of this is really circumstantial, but they did have the rugs that were missing from Lori's house, and on them they found evidence of Rick's blood. But again, all of it is circumstantial. Lori's case went cold for 10 years. It wouldn't be until 2016 when a cold case unit was started in Auburn that Lori's case got a second look. The investigators who started this cold case unit opened Lori's case first. Hers was the first case that they would look at, and they started re-interviewing people and re-looking at the evidence and just trying to figure out what had happened exactly. That is when the investigators came across an envelope that had not been opened in 10 years. So I told you that they had found the blood on the doorknob and also semen on her bed sheets. They had sent this evidence off to be tested for DNA, and when the DNA came back, it was Rick's. It was Rick's DNA. It was his semen on the bed, and it was his blood on the doorknob. There was also DNA extracted from the cigarette butt that was found near Lori's car, and that DNA came back at also a match to Rick. So at this point, they have a pretty strong case against Rick, but he had moved all the way to Virginia, and he was happily engaged at this point, and he was had a good job. Like, it seemed like his life was going pretty well. But police moved in on August 6th of 2018 and arrested him in Virginia, and he was extradited back to Alabama. But the funniest part about him being arrested on August 6th was that was his birthday. So he was arrested on his birthday, and all of this came as a shock to his coworkers, to his fiance, to his family. It was just a shock to everybody. There was a coworker that he worked with that he had spoken to a couple of times, and when this coworker asked Rick why he had moved to Virginia, Rick had responded with, "I needed to hide a body." And at first the coworker had thought it was just a joke, but after he was arrested, it seemed really chilling, and this evidence was also used in trial. Rick's trial was postponed several times due to the epidemic that happened in 2020. I don't know if I can say that word yet. So, but we all know what happened in 2020. And so his trial was pushed back several times because of that. But eventually he was able to stand trial, and he was very adamant that he was innocent, that he had not hurt Lori. During the trial, additional evidence was also brought up. One of the co-workers that had worked with him at the bowling alley back in Auburn had said that the day that Lori had gone missing, Rick had called him and said he had ran out of gas and asked this coworker if he could bring him a gas can full of gas and if Rick could keep the can. The coworker wasn't able to do so, but the gas can that they found close to where Lori's car was found they were able to match that with a gas can that went missing from the bowling alley. So this case was pretty solid. Rick still was adamant that he was not guilty, that he had not killed Lori, but it only took the jury 2 days to come back with a guilty verdict. Now, the death penalty was on the table for this case, but the DA had a conversation with Arlene and the rest of Lori's family, and they decided to go with life without parole. Arlene said that this would make sure that Rick was in jail for the rest of his life, and that there was no possibility of him getting out. And this would stop Rick from having multiple appeals. He was just going to spend the rest of his life in jail and justice would be served for Lori. And I think that's what Arlene was looking for after all of these years of waiting for justice to be served. And so Rick is still currently incarcerated. And yeah, he's going to be behind bars for the rest of his life. And I think that's exactly where he needs to be. And this case really shocked me. I'll tag the YouTuber who did the story on this a couple of days ago too, but I was listening to this story and it was just really shocking to me because had he been behind bars for longer for doing what he did to his mother and stepfather, Lori would still be here and she would still be living her life and we would not be having this conversation at all. Unfortunately, Lori's body has never been found. They never found her body and yeah. And I think it just goes to show just how broken our system is in some areas. And so, yeah, I would love to know your thoughts on this. Do you think that Rick should have spent more time in jail when he was 12 years old? Should he have been sentenced to a much more difficult sentence? Or what are your thoughts on this? I'd love to know them down below, but that's pretty much all I have for you today. So yeah, I hope this finds you so well, and I hope you are doing well. I hope you're safe, happy, and healthy. And yeah, that's all I have for you. So we'll see you next time. Bye.